If this Leafs player is equal to or better than the other guy at the other end of the ice, Toronto can win this series. That's despite the bookies heavily favoring the Florida Panthers without home ice advantage. Minus 176 to the Leafs' plus 146, which I think is a bit big, if I'm being honest with you. But the odds are completely understandable because history tells us this is where, more or less, the Toronto Maple Leafs season comes to an end. It's usually the first round, let's be real. The last time they made it to the second round, 2023, against the Florida Panthers. Remember that? We won Florida. You remember that? And the Florida Panthers beat them in 5 games. Going back to that series, though, and reviewing some of those games, they were a lot closer than what I remembered. 2 OT games, all 1-goal games except for game 1 where the Panthers won 4-2. But what the Toronto Maple Leafs didn't have in that series was solid, consistent, near top of the league goaltending. And they have that now with Anthony Stolarz. Former Panther, Cup-winning Panther, backup to Sergei Bobrovsky, Anthony Stolarz. In my opinion, it's the best goaltending the Leafs have had since the early 2000s with Curtis Joseph and Ed Belfour. Go look at the numbers. Pretty similar. And I know it's a small sample size because Stolarz has only started 6 playoff games in his NHL career, and those 6 games came in the first round against the Ottawa Senators, where he was fantastic. You can label him the MVP of that series because there were games, stretches in that games where he either kept the Leafs in the game or held on to the lead for Toronto. That's how good he was. But now he faces his toughest test. He went up against one Vezina winner in Ottawa against Linus Ullmark. Not great in the playoffs. Now he goes up against Sergei Bobrovsky, the best goaltender, in my opinion, in the NHL. I know Hellebuck's got the Vezina, and he's been good in the regular season, but the NHL season doesn't end in the regular season. You have to prove it in the playoffs, the most important time of the year. And Bobrovsky's been doing that. 2 Vezinas and a cup, back-to-back Stanley Cup finals on his back. That's how good Bobrovsky's been. Now, if you're going into this series and you're thinking Stolarz is going to outperform Bobrovsky, you're crazy. That's not what I'm saying. He has to be equal to him at least to give Toronto a chance. If he's better, I think Toronto can win this series based on how they're playing. This new style of play under Craig Berube. This is the style that Brad Treliving, the Leafs GM, wanted them to play. Big defenseman, clog the middle of the ice, block a lot of shots, everything to the outside, score dirty, grimy goals in front of the net. You know who has that recipe and does it better than anyone else? The Florida Panthers. And the Leafs are trying to do that. So they're going to have to try and beat them at their own game. Very difficult to do. As we saw in the first round with Florida and Tampa, it was men against boys. Let's just be honest. 5 games. The Panthers demolished the Tampa Bay Lightning in a series I thought would go 7 and the Lightning would win. Boy, was I wrong. Stars didn't show up for Tampa, and Andrei Vasilevsky did not look like Vasilevsky. He looked more like Ilya Samsonov. I don't know why I'm throwing shade at Ilya Samsonov, but I've seen him in the past for the Leafs, and there were times where it was like, dude, can you please make a save? That was Vasilevsky, but the guys in front of him weren't great either. This is a different test for Florida, and this is an extremely tough test for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Specifically for this core 4, I think this is their biggest test ever. You're facing the best team in hockey, the team, in my opinion, who should be favored to win the Stanley Cup against any team. They should be the favorites in every single series. The core 4 need to elevate to a level they've never been before. In that second round series back in 2023, the core 4 of Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, and John Tavares combined for a total of 9 points, dude. Austin Matthews had 2 assists. It's just not good enough. That's not going to cut it. You're not going to win any series when the production from your stars is that minimal. Like, it's just not going to happen. They showed up against Ottawa at least in the games that they won and the games that mattered, and that was the X factor, as was Anthony Stolarz. But Stolarz needs to be good, and the Leafs are giving him that platform to be good because they're allowing him to see a lot of shots, and they're blocking the most shots out of any team that's still alive in the NHL playoffs. So that's huge. If the defense can continue to do that and let him see those shots from the Florida Panthers, he's going to have a good chance to save most of those. As for Bobrovsky, he's made the least amount of saves in the playoffs. And that's because how much the Florida defense and the Florida forwards limit offensively against them. And because Tampa didn't really take that many shots, the least amount of shots in the playoffs, which I found very interesting. It was a tight series that way, but it also wasn't tight. But the Panthers are good at that. They're good at limiting what the opposition does. They're good at limiting zone entries. And it's going to be difficult for the Leafs to get through that, as we've seen in the past. But if they're allowing Stolarz to see those shots, he's going to make more saves than he doesn't. And that bodes well for the Leafs trying to win this series. And like most series, an important piece to it is who wins the special teams battle. Right now, the Leafs power play looks pretty good. They're third in the playoffs, 6 for 17. And if you look at the games that they won against Ottawa, they scored a power play goal. Game 1, 3 for 6. Game 2, 1 for 1. Game 3, 1 for 2. Won all those games. The 2 games that they lost, 4 and 5. 0 for 4 on the power play, 0 for 3 on the power play. In the clinching game, they went 1 for 1 with an Austin Matthews goal on the power play. So it's crucial to their success, right? They're middle of the pack, more or less, 5 on 5. So is Florida. But if their power play dies out, like we've seen it before in the past, and that's one of the reasons why they've always struggled to get past the first round, is that they can't translate that super talented power play from the regular season to the playoffs. But they're starting to do that, and it needs to continue in this series. But unfortunately, they're going up against one of the best PKs in the league. Look what they did to the Tampa Bay Lightning power play, who were top 3 heading into the postseason. They limited them to 2 for 18. That's a hell of a power play. That's Kucherov, that's Point, that's Gensel, that's Hedman. That's an elite power play. Very similar to the Leafs power play. Maybe even better. And they gave them nothing. If that happens to the Leafs, this is a short series. This might be 4 or 5. Seriously. So there's so many matchups to look at in this series. You got the Barkov line against the Matthews line. You got 2 elite centers, 1A against 1A. Barkov usually gets the best of Matthews and that line. So that's something we're really going to have to watch out for. But I talked about the core 4, and it's the core 4 against, in my opinion, the Panthers' agitators / true X factors. That's Matthew Tkachuk. That's Sam Bennett. That's Brad Marchand, who's haunted the Leafs since 2013. Since 2013, Brad Marchand has been beating the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs. That's an unheard of run in any sport. But he's back, and now he's with the Panthers. He doesn't have the same role that he did on the Bruins, but he's effective at what he's doing. This third line for the Panthers may be the best third line in hockey. You got Brad Marchand, you got Listerinen, you get Lundell. Those are 3 cup champions who are playing extremely well right now. They've outscored their opponents 4-0 in the first round, and they've combined for 19 points. The entire Maple Leafs bottom 6 have combined for 10 points. And the Leafs don't really have a third line. Unless they elevate that Lawton, Lorentz, Yarncroke line, who Berube loves using, to their third line, that's the only way they match up against that, because then it's who? It's Domi, Pacioretty, McMahon, or Domi, Pacioretty, Holmberg, or Holmberg at center, then Domi and Pacioretty or McMahon. Like, it's just, they haven't found success with that third line. And I'm not saying this is what's going to take Florida over the top, but if this third line wins their minutes and are outscoring whoever they play, which looks like it's probably going to happen if it's third line versus third line or third line versus fourth line, that's a huge advantage for Florida. They know it. That's why they went out and got this guy, to play in that position, to be the depth. And obviously what he does, the intangibles. You saw the clip of Marchand, Bennett, and Tkachuk, all 3 of them looking at each other, laughing and chirping the Tampa Bay Lightning on the bench. It was like 3 high school bullies who are bigger than everybody, telling the younger guys, telling the nerds, hey, listen, when we get out of this thing, we're going to beat the hell out of you. That's what they're going to do to the Leafs. Go back to 2023. There was a moment where Matthew Tkachuk was punching Mitch Marner in the face, and Marner was standing there laughing, eating the punches. It's like, what are you doing? And there was a scrum I'll never forget. I can't remember if this was the Tampa series or the Florida series. I think the Florida series. There was a huge scrum. Sticks were everywhere. And in the shot, here comes Austin Matthews picking up sticks off the ice while everyone scraps and fights and battles. And that was a perfect image of what I'm talking about here. If the core four doesn't elevate to their toughest test ever, they're done. They're done. That's why the Panthers are who they are. And that's why they're favored to win this series. So I think home ice advantage is pretty important to the Toronto Maple Leafs, despite them being a better road team. Actually, we're the best road team with the Capitals in the regular season, which is pretty impressive. But if you look at the Panthers, who were decent on the road during the regular season, won 3 out of 4 against Tampa Bay on the road. So no matter where you play the Panthers, I mean, they're good. They're good, period. But the Leafs, they need to make the most of this home ice advantage. Game 1 is crucial. I think, this is what I think. For the Leafs to win this series, they got to get stellar goaltending. The core four has to show up. And I think they need to win the first 2 games at home. I don't think a split's enough. That's just how, that's the vibe check I'm getting from this series. But I don't think that's going to happen. I believe there'll be a split in the first 2 games. Then I'm leaning towards the Panthers. I think the Panthers get this done in 6 games. Leafs will keep it close, but there's too many question marks in my opinion. Stolarz has never had this type of workload. Can he continue to make these saves? Can the Leafs score on the power play the way that they did against the Senators and not go on these dry spells like they did against the Sens and lose crucial games? I just don't have the answers to those questions. And any question that I have about the Panthers has been answered over the past 3 seasons and in the first round. They're the sure thing. That's why they're favored. Give me the Panthers in 6 games. All right, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video and you took something away from this preview. But I want to know in the comments below who you got and how many games. And do you actually think, if you're leaning Leafs, tell me why you believe this is the year for the Leafs to be different and overcome this Goliath of a team in the Florida Panthers. Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.